Hello everyone, my name is Gaganveer Singh, and in this video I am going to demonstrate for my task 3.2p of SIT331, which was to develop full web API implementation for the robot controller system. In this task, I was required to design and implement a new system architecture using the web API approach in .NET Core. The system is divided into two main bounded contexts, robot commands and maps. I will be showing you the implementation of the controllers and endpoints for each of these contexts. The robot command controller is responsible for managing all the robot commands in the system. First, let me show you the robot command class that I have created, which have the following properties: ID, name, description, isMove command, created date, and modified date. In the controller file, I have initialized a private static list of robot command object representing the initial set of commands in the system. The list contains 5 objects. Now let's start with the first endpoint. Get API robot commands. I have used HTTP get attribute to map this method to the appropriate URL. This method returns IEnumerable robot command, which allows client to receive the full list of robot commands. Now let's verify its functionality in the Postman. In the Postman, I have already created a collection of task 3.2p which has all the available requests that are going to be needed in this task. So we can see that I have received a 200 OK response with all the 5 commands. Now next I have the get API robot commands move endpoint, which returns only the robot commands that are considered move commands. Like in this context, the only move command is of ID 3 with the name move. This function I have used link where clause to filter out the command list and return only the relevant commands. The return type is also IEnumerable robot command for the client to receive all the filtered lists. Now let's verify its functionality. So here we have received only the third robot command. Now let's look at the get API robot commands ID. This endpoint is to retrieve the command by an ID. In this function, I first check if the command with the specific ID is present in the commands list or not using the first or default function. If the command is present in the database that it is not null, I return OK status using the IActionable result, which returns a 200 OK status with the command object. Else a not found message is returned with command with ID. The specific ID doesn't exist. Now if I add ID that is available in the database like 4, I would receive that specific ID. But if I try to add an ID that is not in the list, I will send a 404 not found status with the message command with ID doesn't exist. Moving on to the post API robot commands endpoint, which allows creating a robot command. In this endpoint, I first check whether the robot or command object provided by the user is not null. If it is null, I return a bad request and with the message please enter details. If the name of the command is already in the database, I return a conflict message with command by specified name already exists in the command database. Else, if command is not in the database with a similar name, I create a new object of the robot command with the ID incremented by 1 with the previous count of the list and created date and modified date set to now and add it to the list. Finally, I here return created at route IAction as a result get robot command, which returns the new object created. The return type is IActionable result. Now let's verify its functionality here. Now if I add a new command with name run, we could see that it has been created with ID 6, but if I try to add the same command in the database, I would receive a conflict 409 conflict message with command by already exists. Now to verify whether the command has been successfully added, we could also see this endpoint. Next, I have the put API robot commands endpoint, which allows updating an existing robot command. I first check if the updated command is not null, and if it is null, I return a bad request. Next, I check if the command ID specified by the client is present in the commands list or not. If the ID is like -1, whether it is not present in the database, I return not found status, and else I find the command by name. Then I update the robot command. First, I check if the name provided by the user is not already in the database. If it is the name has been same, it has been same. I return that command with name already exit with conflict I actionable result. Next, I check if the your name is not empty. If it's not empty, I update the details like is move command name description, and finally I update the modified date without affecting the created date. With the modified date set to date time now. Then I return OKI actionable result with command bit ID modified successfully. Now if I try to update this command like backwards, command bit 6 ID modified successfully. If I try to again retrieve this command, you see that it has been only updated the name but not the other field that has been not been specified, and the date has also been changed. In this case the time has been updated. Now if I try to update the command like for with the similar name I used before, I will receive a 409 conflict message with command with backwards already exists. Also if I try to add an ID like 9, also command with ID doesn't exist. Lastly, the delete API robot commands ID endpoint allows deleting a robot command by its ID. First, I find the index specified by the user. If the index is not present in the list, I return command with ID doesn't exist. And if it is present, I remove the command, the specified index, and return an OK message. Now let's check its efficient. Now if I try to delete the command with 6 ID, we'll see the command with ID remove 6, remove 6 with 200 OK message. Now if I try to retrieve the 6 command again, I receive command with ID doesn't exist. So as we have finished with the robot command controller, now let's move to the map controllers. The map controller is responsible to manage the maps in the system. Similar to the robot command, I have a map class where the following properties ID, columns, rows, name, description, created date, and modified date. In the maps controller, similar to the robot command controller, I have initialized a static list, static private list with 4 maps, 4 initial maps. The first endpoint is get API maps. The implementation is similar to the one in the robots command controller, retaining an enumerable map. Now let's check it in the Postman. So I receive a 200 OK response with all the 4 maps. The next endpoint is the get API maps. Get API map square, which returns only the maps that are square. I have used the link where clause to filter out the maps list and return the relevant maps. It returns the map square where the number of rows equals to the number of columns. If I look at the list here, we could see that the map map with ID 1 and 4 are the square maps. Now let's check its verification here. So we can see that we received only map n 1 and 4. The next endpoint is the get API maps ID map ID endpoint, which retrieves the specific map by its ID. If the map is found with a map found specified by the ID using the first or default clause, if it is not null, we return an OK status with its object. If it is not present, we return not found the 404 status code with the message map with ID doesn't exist. The return type is IE actionable result. So we have 4 ID. If I add ID 3, we can see that it returns successfully. If I ID like a 7, map with ID doesn't exist. The next endpoint is a HTTP post endpoint, which allows the client to create a new map. The return type is IE actionable result, and it accepts the map object. In this function, I first check whether the object is not null or whether the columns and row specified value is not 0. If it is so, I return a bad request with the message please enter details. If the name specified by the user for the map is already present in the maps collection, I return a conflict message with the map with name. The specific name already exists in the command collection. I have used first or default clause of link class here. Next, I increment the map ID by 1 by taking the help of count function, which gets the number of elements of the list. Then I also update the created date and modified date to the now the time of creation and add it to the list. Finally, I return created at route get map new ID action result, which will return 201 created HTTP status code and provide the URL of the newly created resource. So if I try to add a map with the size 2 and name 2 by 2 map, you can see that it has been successfully added. And 201 created status code has been received. Now if I try to read a map with ID 5, also the map has columns and row equal. Would also verify its functionality here. So we have received here. So if I try to add a map with the same name here, I should receive conflict message. So I have received a conflict message. The next is the put API maps endpoint, which allows updating an existing map. Here in this function, we accept ID and updated map. I first check whether the object of the map to be updated is not null. If it's so, I return a message modification for the map field. If the ID is specified by the user is present in the maps list, we update the field. But if it's not present, I return a not found message. Next, if the ID is present in the database, I check whether the name specified by the user, whether the name he wants to update, he or she wants to update, is not same as of the other command, other map. Now, based on the data provided by the user, I update the respective fields here and set the modified date to now. And finally, I return an OK I actionable result message with map with ID specified modified successfully. Now let's update endpoint 5, which was earlier 2 by 2 map. Now if I try to update, you could see that my 5 has been updated successfully. Now let's fetch this map again. So it has been updated successfully. Now to check whether I would receive a conflict or not. So we can see that I received a 409 conflict message. The next is the delete API maps at bird, which allows to delete a map specified by the ID. I first check here whether the ID is present in the list or not. If it is not present, I return a not found message. If it is in the database, I remove it using the remove add function. Then I return I actionable result OK response, which would result two-headed OK message with map with ID removed successfully. Now if I try to remove map with ID 5, map with ID 5 removes it. If I try to again remove this command, I would receive 404 not updated. Now let's check whether it has been deleted successfully or not. So we can see that I only received 4 commands. Finally, I have the get API maps ID X and Y coordinate endpoint, which is to check whether the coordinate is within the map range or not. First I check whether the coordinate is greater than 0 or not. Next, if it is in greater than 0, I find the index of the map specified by the ID. If it is not present in the database, I did not found 404 status code, I actionable result. And next, if it is present, I return the is move map. I make a flag here which checks whether the X and Y are in the range of the columns and rows of the database. Then return this bool value here. Now for to check for map 4. Now let's see what map 4 has. Map 4 has columns 50 by 50. So if I add like this here, share it, I receive a false message.